Coming up on Soul of the South News, the death toll rises as protests lead to more violence in Egypt. Honoring the service and commitment that Medgar Evers gave, which helped to pave the road for freedom and equality.
The meaning of Medgar Evers' life and death is that he embraced the fundamental struggle.
A shortage of shrimp could add up to higher prices on the menu and at the grocery store. And celebrating Willie Mays, see what number 24 has in common with what's cooking in this New Orleans kitchen in tonight's Spotlight story.
This is Soul of the South News.
No, I'm not afraid for my life. I'm afraid for my religion. I'm afraid for my country. I don't afraid for my life.
Protesters showed no signs of backing down in Egypt today, especially this man, who you can see walking along a bridge and randomly firing into the crowd. Just another example of the unrest in the country. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Soul of the South News. I'm Roy Hobbs. Another day of violence in Egypt. It's unclear if a government-imposed curfew is even holding. Earlier, thousands of protesters clogged the streets at Cairo's Ramses Square following afternoon prayer. They had promised a Friday of anger. Already, dozens of people were killed or injured in clashes between supporters of the ousted president, Mohamed Morsi, and security forces. And to show you just how dangerous it is, one of the many news crews was setting up for a live report when gunfire erupted.
And it's very difficult to determine what's happening because, as in the past, actually, here's someone who's injured. I know we have to go, but here's someone that appears to be injured.
Since Wednesday, more than 580 people have been killed in these violent protests. While Egyptians fight to understand their new democracy, we remember those who fought for our civil rights. Medgar Evers was one of them, and while he fought quietly, his message was loud and clear. Here's Soul of the South's Mary Major with tonight's cover story.
While Medgar Evers worked relentlessly for freedom and justice, he shunned being in the public eye, never seeking promotion or publicity.
I would say to him, Medgar, everybody else is publicizing themselves. Why don't you do so too? And his answer was always, I'm not about that. I'm about doing the job. I'm about caring for my people and other people and to see that justice prevails.
And his work had created a national tidal wave.
The blood that Medgar shed laid the groundwork for the March on Washington, which took place that August. Laid the groundwork for LBJ and this Public Accommodation Bill of 1964. The Voting Rights Act of 65. So you really have to put Medgar Evers, Lyndon Johnson, and Martin Luther King in the same bracket. Today's challenge is to not just remember what did happen, but know that we're free but not equal. Mississippi is the poorest, highest poverty rate of any state in the nation. Second highest black-white gap of income in the country. And its prison rate is the second highest in the nation. And so we have unfinished business.
On the 50th anniversary of Medgar Evers' assassination, his alma mater, Alcorn State University, honored his contributions with a bronze statue. And during a memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery, where Medgar Evers was buried with full military honors, President Clinton spoke of his service and bravery.
The meaning of Medgar Evers' life was that he came home, and even though he had a gorgeous wife and beautiful kids and an unbelievable life to look forward to, he said, it can't be that I was a soldier in the American Army and I stood up for freedom and I can't vote. My neighbors can't vote. We're going back into a system that favors control over sharing, domination over cooperation. That'll never do.
The NAACP posthumously awarded him the coveted Spingarn Award, and National President Ben Jealous spoke of his heroic contributions and leadership.
You know, this is a day when one of our greatest heroes was taken from us wrongfully with ill intent It's a day of memory. But with that memory also comes the celebration that so much has been achieved because Medgar got us moving in the right direction, because he was willing to give his life, like JFK, like RFK, like Martin Luther King Jr., for the great cause of freedom in our country. And so this is a day to remember. It's a day, I think, where there will be moments of sadness and mourning and loss, but it's also a day to celebrate how much further our country has come.
When Emmett Till was killed, we were hurt. When Medgar was killed, we felt lost. We lost an authentic leader on his way to becoming a real global spokesman. But his bloodshed was designed to stop the movement. It inspired us. When Medgar was killed, the movement multiplied. And so those who shot him to kill him only really multiplied the manifold.
His legacy is one of a true citizen servant, from grassroots organizing to voter rights and school desegregation. His death spurred the Civil Rights Act. In a speech, he said he would like to tell his grandchildren, "I was active in the struggle from all phases for your unrestricted privilege as an American." I'm Mary Major for Soul of the South.
And on August 28th, this country will mark the 50th anniversary of one of the most defining moments in the civil rights movement, the March on Washington. Time magazine is paying tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in its new issue and revealing some potentially never before heard stories about that pivotal day. Hundreds of thousands marched to the nation's capital in support of a movement that put the country on a path toward irreversible change. Times editor says the youth of the key players then was a crucial component in publishing this tribute now.
They're still with us. They can tell their own stories, and it was so important to us to talk to them directly and hear their memories of that day.
Times tribute is called One Dream, and you can read the stories and see the photos inside the hard copy as well as on Times website. When Soul of the South News continues, is there a correlation between racism and high blood pressure?
Remembering 34 striking workers who lost their lives at a South African mine. Some surprising information about safety restraints for your canine companion.
There's been a lot of innovation that continues, and we keep on every day continue to improve these.
I'm Vicki Newton. Coming up, we take you for a home-cooked meal in New Orleans at a house Willie Mays built, and not the one you're thinking of.
You are watching Soul of the South News.
8 years after Hurricane Katrina, there's a new face on the city of New Orleans, but with the new, there's a lot about the old New Orleans that hasn't changed. Soul of the South's Vicki Newton explains in tonight's Spotlight story.
Roy, some of the familiar landmarks in the Big Easy have weathered the storm. They're back in business and they're doing well. One of those is the longtime favorite, Willie Mays Scotch House. On a hot summer day, there is nothing like a cool drink, good food, and Willie Mays.
There's a long drive way back in center field, way back, it is.
Not that Willie Mays, this Willie Mays, a landmark restaurant tucked away in the Treme neighborhood of New Orleans that was devastated by Hurricane Katrina.
All of the local politicians and mayors of New Orleans and the surrounding parishes were on the news in a frantic, and this is so uncommon, and they were saying things like, "You got to get the hell out of here." They really don't talk like that on the news, so we were like, we better pack up and go.
And like Willie Mays, the ball player, Willie Mays Scotch House is a national treasure. Not even a hurricane could keep her down.
We were actually here before the community came back, in a sense. Maybe it was a handful of people back on this block and in this immediate community. And I think that was kind of like the heart of it, that we played a role in the landlords, the tenants, and the homeowners here, us in Dookie Chase, to say if these businesses think enough of this community to come back and don't want to relocate, then I can come back.
Willie Mays started in the 1950s as only a bar. In that same building, a beauty shop and a barber shop, but customers wanted more. They got it.
It was very family oriented when my great grandmother had it, and it was more of like the same regular customers pretty much came every day. Sometimes we would have a new customer, but obviously it was referred by an old customer. She never did any advertisements, so it was strictly word of mouth. We had, on a daily basis, most of all of the local politicians and police officers, you know, the judges, the mayor, and state, local, things like that. That's what was here daily. And then we would have some locals from right here in the neighborhood.
Today it is that lasting determination and good food that bring people from all around the country here, like this young man with his family on his birthday.
I was watching the Food Network one day, and there was the special done in New Orleans, and they were covering a number of the restaurants here in the city. And ever since I'd seen it, I decided I wanted to come. I got some fried chicken, some okra and macaroni, just some of these food staples, I guess, in the South. I've already had a bite of the chicken. It's really good.
I've been eating here for the last 15 years or better. I was eating here, just telling my man I was eating here when they only had a small part in the front. So now that they can expand, and it's helping the community come back.
Willie Mae's been around probably before I've been around. It's a staple of the community. I mean, it's good food. It's a family restaurant, so I mean, it's just what we need.
Willie Mae's is not just another New Orleans eatery. The story of the Scotch House has been told by more reporters than you can mention, from locals to networks, all wanting to know the secrets of their kitchen, what's in the recipe for their fried chicken. Several years back, Willie Mae herself was asked for her recipe.
Well, I ain't gonna give it out now. I'm not gonna, that's a secret, ask her. I could have unsold that recipe. I could have unsold it for a lot of money. I'm not gonna do that.
Age has slowed Willie Mae Seaton, now in her 90s. She no longer runs the restaurant, but it is still a family operation. Her great-granddaughter, Carrie Seaton Blackman, stepped in. She grew up in the restaurant.
Didn't really know that this was going to be my life, but it's a family business, and that's how that goes sometimes. You know, we think that something else is in our path, but then, you know, family comes first.
Hurricane Katrina nearly killed Willie Mae's, but there was a spirit that didn't die. It was a loss that New Orleans and this community could not afford.
We're always connected, and we're more friendlier, and we care about other people's feelings, and we want to make other people happy. And if you have a frown on your face, then we kind of say, well, how you doing? How's your mom? How's everybody? You know, we're a little bit warmer.
No one can see into the future, but it is clear that whatever is down the road for New Orleans, Willie Mae's Scotch House will be in the middle of it, with good food, good friends, and a very good neighbor. I'm Vicki Newton, Soul of the South News.
And still ahead on Soul of the South News.
Anger grows one day after a deadly car bomb destroys a Beirut neighborhood. Thousands of South Africans honor mine workers who lost their lives fighting for better wages. And you could suffer sticker shock the next time you buy shrimp, while the cost of prawns from Thailand and other Asian markets is on the rise.
Soul of the South News. This is Hope.
Topping our News Digest this evening, New York City takes the first step towards appealing a federal judge's ruling that its police department's controversial stop and frisk policy is unconstitutional. Earlier this week, a judge ruled to appoint a federal monitor to oversee sweeping reforms to the city's police tactics. City officials are also asking for the order to be delayed while the appeal is pending. This has been a day of mourning and anger in Beirut after yesterday's car bombing that killed 20, wounded at least 200, and left others trapped in damaged buildings. The blast happened in the southern suburbs controlled by Hezbollah. A Sunni Islamist group has claimed responsibility, saying it was in retaliation against the intervention of Shiite Hezbollah backing the Syrian regime. Lebanon's Sunni Muslims mostly support the rebels in Syria. A somber memorial service on the so-called Hill of Horror in South Africa. The service was for 34 striking workers who were shot to death by police a year ago at the Marikana mine. The memorial service was attended by politicians, unions, and civic leaders today and ended with a moment of silence to mark the killings. Divers from India's Navy may have found 4 bodies on a sunken submarine that caught fire earlier this week. Officials say the bodies were so badly burned they'll have to use DNA to identify them. The intense heat from the fire warped the hatches from the inside, making it difficult for the divers to get into some areas of the sub. It's believed that there is little chance of finding the 14 other crew members alive. 3 people have died from a highly infectious fever that was thought to be the Ebola virus. A Ugandan farmer was suffering from what appeared to be some of the symptoms of Ebola: high fever, sudden headache, bleeding, back and stomach pain. However, tests show the farmer had something called Congo-Crimean hemorrhagic fever, which is symptoms similar to Ebola. The last Ebola outbreak in Uganda in 2000 infected 425 people and killed more than half of them. A disease in Thailand, China, and Vietnam is causing a steep rise in shrimp prices. They are up more than 50% from last year to almost $6 a pound. Analysts say the average American eats 4 pounds of shrimp a year, and that's expected to drop this year. But if you like lobster, there's some good news. The average lobster tail is selling at its lowest price in 11 years. The demand for gold is at a record high, up 53%, while gold prices have dropped by some 30%. The demand is mostly driven by China and India, where consumers are rushing to buy jewelry, coins, and gold bars. Gold is typically seen as a safe haven for investors during tough economic times. But with the major developed economies recovering, many investors see little reason to own it now. And when Soul of the South news continues.
When I slammed on the brakes to avoid an accident, Maggie went flying.
Are dog car restraints a good thing for your pet? The answer might not be what you expect.
Topping your health news tonight, African-American patients who worry or think frequently about race have higher blood pressure than those who don't. Researchers at Johns Hopkins say it's been difficult to explain why African-Americans have higher blood pressure. They say it doesn't appear to be genetic, but while diet, exercise, and reduced access to health care may contribute, they say the sense of being treated differently because of their race could also possibly explain some of what's behind the higher rates. Back to school often means back to germs for millions of kids. On average, elementary school children get 8 to 12 colds or cases of the flu each school year. For older kids, it's about half that number. You can keep your kids healthy by making sure they get plenty of sleep, exercise, at least 40 minutes a day, and make sure they wash their hands often with soap and water. Another way to keep your family healthy: probiotics, or good bacteria. You can find them in supplements, yogurt, even kefir, even olives. Healthy bacteria already live in our gut to help us with digestion and to ward off harmful bacteria. Probiotics are especially useful when you're taking an antibiotic or have an infection. They can help replenish the good bacteria.
There are some suggestions, mostly from lab studies and animal studies, that probiotics can strengthen your immune system.
Anyone with a compromised immune system shouldn't take probiotics. Otherwise, experts consider them safe with just few side effects. About 16% of dog owners restrain their pets in the car, according to AAA. But recent crash tests for pet restraints are not encouraging. Every restraint the Center for the Pet Safety tested with dog dummies failed. And it showed that serious injuries or deaths to animals are likely. Restraints were found not to be strong enough to protect pets, and dogs could actually be choked by them in a crash.
You want to first look for the crash video posted by the manufacturer to their website. If the dog launches off the seat, there's a risk there.
Not every manufacturer does adequate testing or wants industry standards, so experts say it's important for pet owners to educate themselves.
Next week on Soul of the South News, thousands descended on the nation's capital almost 50 years ago. The peaceful assembly brought people from all walks of life together for a common cause, freedom and equality for everyone.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
Hear from those with shared experiences from the 1963 March on Washington and join us as we take you to this year's observances as Soul of the South News countdowns to history.
We hope you'll join us next week for those stories and more on Soul of the South News. For now, I'm Roy Hobbs. Good night.